People need this open space. They need the parks to relieve themselves of the strain of living in a city.
I am convinced in my mind that the health and the productivity of this country is dependent on the kind of park systems that we have. That it's within these systems that people can get rid of the tensions and the frustrations that confront us today. And if we have healthy minds and healthy bodies, then we are going to be a productive nation.
This is the world as Bill Mott envisioned it. An oasis available to everyone, natural, accessible, informative. A means to anchor our emotions and to look toward the future.
It's our feeling that in the next 50 years, with the population in this Bay Area tripling, that open space for people is going to be more significant than paved roads and parking lots for automobiles.
William Penn Mott, Jr., better known as Bill to those who knew him, was a legend in the park movement at every level, local, regional, state, national, and international. As was stated in the book Prophet of the Parks, written by Mary Ellen Butler, on the genius of Bill Mott, he was a modern-day John Muir in his environmental concerns. Bill Mott believed that parks were necessary for the growth and prosperity of mankind and spent his entire career to make that vision come true. While it was John Muir whose pioneering work at Yosemite National Park helped create the National Park Service, it was Bill Mott who carried the national parks to new levels of excellence and growth during his tenure as National Park Service Director. And it was Bill Mott's vision and leadership that masterminded the transfer of the Presidio in San Francisco from a military base to a major urban national park.
One of Bill's greatest assets, I think, was his long-range vision, combined with his imagination and his creative spirit. And as a result of that, he was able to literally double the size of the California park system during his 8 years in office. And then later on, as director of the National Park Service, to add 12 new parks. And one of the interesting things that illustrates his vision, while he was director, he helped dedicate the Great Basin National Park in Nevada, which he had recommended to be built when he was a National Park Service planner 50 years before in 1937.
The 360-degree view at Briones Regional Park is certainly one of the most varied in the Bay Area. This wonderful 6,000-acre park in Contra Costa County is a delight for anyone seeking solitude and space. Mott's Peak, named in honor of Bill Mott, rises to almost 1,500 feet and is the highest point in the park. Fittingly, Briones was the first regional park acquired by Bill Mott, in part by purchase and in part by donation from Contra Costa County, which at that time had no parks at all. It was the beginning of an approach that was to become one of the hallmarks of his career.
And there was some concern because it has these beautiful valleys that it would be developed. And we felt that this was wrong, that it should be kept in public ownership. And so we started negotiating with the East Bay Municipal Utility District and the private owners that were involved on the eastern part of the park, and found out that we could work out a program of acquisition.
My name is Richard Trudeau, and it was my good pleasure and good fortune to know and work with Bill Mott for over 40 years. He was both my friend and mentor. The program and ideas that Bill Mott engendered throughout his career serve as a legacy to the park people throughout the country. They also serve as a standard for land acquisition and park operations. During his career, Bill Mott transformed the parks departments into professionally run organizations. He doubled the amount of land in the park systems he served, initiated creative ideas for parkland usage, and began the interpretive training programs that are considered so essential today. Bill also hired the first woman park rangers and performed the first park usage and accessibility studies. He made us aware of the intrinsic value of the parks. He actively promoted their public usage, and he set the example for the application of volunteerism and private foundation funding that have become a backbone of support for the park systems today. It is my great honor to serve as chairman of the Mott Memorial Fund and to ensure that others will learn of the great work that Bill Mott has done.
For those of us who knew Bill Mott, we remember him as someone with a vision for the future, with a passion for our parks, and with a perseverance for getting the job done. And I think those values certainly typify the work of the Mott Fund in keeping the standard high and the flame lit.
Bill Mott was born in New York City and grew up in Michigan. Both he and his uncle loved to camp and hike.
And I think the contrast of going from New York City to rural Michigan helped him see the importance of people having a connection with the natural world and being able to deal with to maintain civility in society. And also this philosophy of service beyond self, of creating a better society, working to help improve the quality of life for people you don't even know. I believe that has some of its basis in the Quaker philosophy. They have a very strong service-oriented philosophy as well.
My mother, when she died, I was sent to live with my aunt in Jonesville, Michigan, after living in a major metropolitan center with a high school graduation of 1,200 seniors, and in Jonesville there were 8. And that experience of being in the out of doors in a rural community and enjoying that kind of an opportunity, I think, led me into landscape architecture, and landscape architecture naturally led me into park work.
Your first job, can I call you Bill? Yeah, okay. Your first job, Bill, after receiving your M.A. in landscape architecture from UC Berkeley in 1933, was as a landscape architect for the National Park Service.
In 1945, Bill was appointed superintendent of parks for the city of Oakland. Over the next 17 years, the city parks bloomed under Mott's hand.
We also felt that the city should be more beautiful and added a great deal of plantings in the center strips throughout the city, introduced the city to the lily of the Nile, which had not been known before, and planted the entire city with the lily of the Nile. We felt that in the city, the parks ought to be not just grass and trees, although that's terribly important. We did add beauty to the parks by adding a great deal of color in the way of annual plantings, but we also added clubhouses in a number of the parks, where the city became a park rather than just a city.
Bill Mott's creative work with the Oakland parks gave him both a state and national reputation. He garnered private support from citizens and local organizations. He redesigned and added important attractions to many parks. One such attraction was Children's Fairyland, which, when completed, not only benefited the local children, but was also an inspiration to Walt Disney, who then applied the Fairyland model when creating Disneyland.
We developed this idea of Children's Fairyland, which has been duplicated all over the country, is now some 40-odd years old, still very popular with kids, interpreting children's stories in 3 dimension with animals, and that has been a very successful program as far as the city is concerned.
We needed to balance the use of the park by adding facilities that would bring children, young people, and adults into the park, and so we created the Garden Center, Children's Fairyland, the Rotary Natural Science Center, so that we were balancing out the use so that people from all disciplines, all ages, and all ethnic groups would find something in the park that that would be useful to them and would provide them with the kind of recreation that they enjoyed.
Growing up as a young teenager in Orinda, my father was head of the Oakland Parks then. Well, my father gave myself an odd job of going and collecting frogs at a local lake because they were needed for the Willie the Blue Whale set at Children's Fairyland for the opening day.
He lived in Orinda, California, and it was here that he raised 3 children, Bill III, John, and daughter Nancy.
He believed, and I think he felt it in his heart as well, that people needed to have a connection with the land, with the natural environment, with plants and with animals, and with things that weren't created by people.
I think working in the garden was a chance to renew himself and to go back and fight the many environmental battles that he did have.
I remember learning from him the joy of little things that you really can't buy, the intrinsic values of plants, of animals, of areas, of scenery, of vistas, or whatever.
Another of his hobbies was making jams and jellies. The jams were very much appreciated by visitors to our home, and often that was a lasting memory that people took home with them after a chat with my father.
The nature area at Lake Merritt Park, which became a haven for many species, gained wide recognition and was made the first official urban wildlife refuge in the nation. Mott also created the Rotary National Science Center next to the duck feeding area in Lakeside Park. He then hired the first full-time naturalist in the country in Paul Cavell, who was a fixture for thousands of interested children for many years.
We established for the first time in any city park an interpretive program. In order to do this, I had to hire Paul Cavell, that many of you may have met and known. I had to hire him as a gardener, but actually to be an interpreter. And we set up an interpretive program in the Oakland City Park system, which was very successful, and I think has made it possible for the city to recognize its responsibility in the preserving of natural and cultural values in the city, as well as protecting them.
The importance of education through interpretation of nature was a cornerstone of his career.
Well, may I call you John?
Sure.
Under Bill Mott's master plan, the Oakland Zoo was established in Nolan Park in the Oakland Hills.
It's really a terrific place, and it's just changing and growing and evolving, and it's something to be hugely proud of. I just think the Oakland Zoo is fabulous, and to see that change in the last couple of decades is just absolutely one of the great gifts. If that alone was all that Bill Mott was involved in, that alone is remarkable, but it's one of many things.
The Dunsmuir House and Gardens, created from a 19th century estate, was another important addition.
With the impact that Bill Mott had on the city of Oakland, it's certainly no surprise that Dr. Robert Gordon Sproul, president of the East Bay Regional Park District Board, and Clyde Woolridge, his vice chair, came calling. They invited Bill Mott to become general manager of the East Bay Regional Park District. He demurred, saying he had still too much to do within the city of Oakland, but if they wanted, they could try him again in 2 years. They did, and he became the general manager of the East Bay Regional Park District in 1960.
He's the only person, so far as I know, and I've checked a little bit into the history, who served as the top official at the city, regional, state, and national park level.
To help with the rejuvenation of the Park District, Bill Mott brought in many new people, myself included.
Well, I think first it seemed to me that it was important to reorganize the district in order to carry out a long-range program. And I felt that it was very important to have both the fiscal program, the public relations, and the interpretive program made important and given status of division heads. And that was done, and we hired people to come in and staff those 3 very important jobs. That was a very important step in order to develop the image of the regional parks and to get the kind of public support that we needed to do the job that was required.
With characteristic foresight, one of Bill Mott's great goals was the acquisition of land for parks while the land still could be acquired. Another of his major goals was the annexation of Contra Costa County, which at the time had no single picnic table or no park anywhere in the county. The voters responded in 1964 by voting to annex to the Park District, and at the same time voting to tax themselves for parks, for the development of parks, and for the public to use.
I think the other thing that's important is that we were able to acquire land for future generations to enjoy. There was some question about taking it off the tax roll and that sort of thing, but I think today people understand why it was important at that time to acquire these lands before they were developed and to make them available to the general public for the future.
Bill Mott successfully negotiated the acquisition of Alameda Beach, the longest sandy beach in Northern California, which includes the naturalist-centered Crab Cove. Guerin Ranch, just outside of Hayward, was acquired by Bill Mott with the help of attorney Jack Smith and named after its former owner. It preserves some of the bygone era charm with a red barn, visitor center, and a blacksmith shop set amongst an orchard of apple trees. Bill Mott was also responsible for the new environmental center at Tilden Regional Park and its adjacent little farm, along with the wonderful picnic areas there and a fabulous merry-go-round now on the Register of Historic Places. Bill also negotiated the lease of Lake Chabot from the East Bay Municipal Utility District, which is a marvelous year-round put-and-take fishing area with some excellent camping. In 1967, Bill was invited by then California Governor Ronald Reagan to become director of the California Department of Parks and Recreation. Bill knew that the state parks needed better management and an infusion of creative ideas. He also believed that to accomplish great goals, credit should be shared.
And I explained to the governor that I was a park professional, that I understood what was required of the state in order to move it forward for the next 25 years, that it would take some reorganization. And I said, that's the way I'm going to run it as a professional administrator. And he said, that's the reason I've asked you to take the job. You run the park system, I'll take care of the politics. And that's the way it was for 8 years. And it was a very good 8 years. We doubled the acreage in the state park system. And Governor Reagan, all through that time, supported me in a number of different innovative ideas that came up that sometimes it's difficult for people, even your own staff, to understand change and accept change.
Bill's leadership principle, what we call number 2, was think creatively, dare to try new and controversial ideas. And one of the steps that Bill outlined for achieving that principle was to give due credit for ideas. He was a modest man in many respects who was all too willing to give credit to those who actually did the work. And believe me, those who worked for us were indebted to that. He just wanted to spin these ideas out and then let people who did the work get the credit.
For the next 8 years, Bill Mott brought the same high expectations and standards to the state of California parks as he had with locally. He devised a number of new programs such as unisex toilets, doubling the size of the park acreage, and hiring the very first woman ranger.
I think another important step was bringing women into the ranger division.
He also created a modern training center with lodgings at Asilomar at no cost to the state. The William Penn Mott Jr. Training Center continues on today.
Well, I think in addition to land acquisition, the development of the training center down at Asilomar was a very important step forward because that enabled us to train not only the rangers but all of the other employees in the department.
Bill Mott founded the California State Park Foundation utilizing the same successful techniques he used at the local level. The State Park Foundation, as a result, has raised millions of dollars, purchased thousands of acres, and now has a membership of 35,000.
Well, government bureaucracy is sometimes difficult to handle problems. They don't have the flexibility, or they can't react as quickly as is necessary in order to do the job. And so I set up this California State Park Foundation, which is a nonprofit corporation that takes on these kinds of projects.
Exhibiting more insight, Mott transformed rundown sections of San Diego and Sacramento into attractive and vibrant historic Old Town parks. One of his most important ventures was the creation of the California State Railway Museum in Old Town Sacramento, the first of its kind.
The Big Four building is both a national and a state historic monument. It will be the first building to be reconstructed as a part of the old Sacramento State Historic Park. And eventually this 9-acre park will have 20 buildings and a major railroad exhibit and museum. It will tell the story of California and Sacramento from the gold rush days of 1849 through the year of 1870. History is the important link in the chain of the past, the present, and the future. History has brought us to this point in time and to this place on this occasion. And through the development in the next 10 years of Old Sacramento, we will recreate some of this history and preserve it for the enlightenment and the enjoyment of the people of our state and our nation.
In 1995, President Ronald Reagan summoned Bill Mott to head the National Park Service as its director.
I think anyone who'd known Bill Mott for 10 minutes or for a lifetime of work had to be affected by his vision and I say his spirit for life, his enthusiasm, his desire to really see things that others may not have seen and have the persistence to do it.
Mott brought new life to the National Park Service, but as with many innovators, he was also involved in some interesting controversies. Against strong opposition from ranchers and from some in Congress, Bill successfully pushed for the introduction of the gray wolf to its ancestral Yellowstone Park habitat, a decision which history has reinforced.
I think one of the things I'm probably most proudest of was his ability to introduce wolves back into Yellowstone National Park.
Despite budget cuts and pressure that public lands should be sold, Bill Mott added a number of new parks and doubled the national park acreage.
He balanced the realities of financial austerity, as I mentioned earlier, with the firm advocacy of his values, and persuaded people that even though money might be tight, that there were other values to consider, values which he talked about in his own terms, the quietness of the Grand Canyon, the beauty of the sunset, the clean air, and the pure water.
Bill Mott firmly believed that the true value of any park was more than its monetary value, and he was active in ensuring that Congress understood this. In addition, he was responsible for founding the President's Commission on Americans Outdoors.
The silence of the canyon. How much was that worth to be able to hike in the canyon and not hear an airplane or a helicopter? What is that value, that intrinsic value? We felt that it was more important than dollars and argued on that basis. I'm not sure that Congress understood in that legislation that for the first time they had declared that silence was an attribute of the national park system.
Mott recognized that an ever-increasingly diverse population had varying expectations of the national park system and initiated the concept of park usage studies to identify those needs. Park usage studies are now employed as standard procedure.
What are the things that you're doing? Maybe some things have been you're doing now don't count anymore, and we ought to abandon those ideas and develop some new techniques. We've been doing social science studies now in some of our parks, and I know when I first introduced this idea, most of our superintendents objected to the idea. They now all want to have social studies done on their parks.
One of his bold and insightful actions was to develop the very first national park accessibility study. This study generated some far-reaching consequences.
Bill Mott did many things to address accessibility. The thing that I think is the most significant that will be remembered for years to come is that he presided over the first ever system-wide accessibility study of a national park system in this country or anywhere in the world. I'd like to sum up what his participation was by this quote that he contributed to our brochure project. Access to the beauty, inspiration, and education of our national parks must be available to the citizens of the world, whether or not they have a disability. Everyone needs the recreative experience of the unspoiled out of doors.
While Bill was committed to providing the best parks possible, he realized that unless people knew of their many benefits, they would go unused. He was the first to instigate what he called marketing the product. Today, marketing is considered essential.
Marketing is a good word. It isn't advertising and promotion. That's not marketing. Marketing is a good word because you have to know what it is that the public is interested in and how to then sell that product. And I think that the state park systems and the national park system of this country have products that are outstanding, and they need to be marketed so that people understand the mission and what the program is all about.
Bill Mott was a spellbinding speaker and in constant demand with his inspirational messages on the environment, parks, trails, and biodiversity. His impact was global in scope. Bill consulted on several foreign park projects, including the Taj Mahal. He also initiated a national park in American Samoa.
That even helped the national park systems in Costa Rica and Australia. He consulted with India on the repair work needed for the Taj Mahal. While at the Presidio, he had responsibility to cover the greater Samoa area, Guam, and Hawaii.
During his lifetime, Bill Mott was very active in community events. He was chairman of the Public Relations Committee for the United Bay Area Crusade, president of the Save San Francisco Bay Association, president of the Oakland Area YMCA, and chairman of the Rotary Club International's Environmental Committee, among many others.
But getting other organizations and other people involved, volunteerism by non-paid government staff, regardless of what agency it was in, to work together and to help whatever cause he was championing at the time.
What impressed me more, though, about Bill Mott was that he didn't leave his dedication at the office. He served as a volunteer in his community to demonstrate that his commitment ran deeper than just what he was paid for. For example, he helped locally to start the Oakland YMCA and the San Francisco Bay Association. At the state level, he worked to start and support the California State Park Foundation. And at the national level, he was one of the founding fathers of the National Recreation and Park Association. At the time of his death, he was still working to make the Presidio into an international conference center for peace. By example, he demonstrated his commitment to his beliefs in everything he did. Bill Mott's legacy stands not only as a shining example for how to be a park and recreation professional, but how to be an exemplary human being.
When Bill Mott died in September 1992, the Mott Fund Foundation was formed to exemplify his creative genius and far-reaching impact.
But I think all of us are disciples of William Penn Mott. And he had a ministry, I think, that'll last forever.
Mary Ellen Butler, a very fine local author, was asked to write a book about Bill with funding provided by Lawrence Rockefeller. Ambassador Bill Lane made a grant of $150,000 and more to the Mott Board on the condition that it must be matched. Matching funds were received from hundreds of individuals and a number of foundations, culminating at a gala celebration held appropriately at the Garden Center at Lake Merritt. one of Bill's many creations. That book, Prophet of the Parks, was published by the National Recreation and Park Association. As testimony and recognition to his many contributions to our parklands, Congress passed legislation naming the Visitor Center at the Presidio for Bill Mott. Working with the Golden Gate National Recreation Association and the National Park Service, the William Penn Mott Jr. Visitor Center at the Presidio of San Francisco was dedicated in July 2000.
As many people have said here earlier today, he was a mentor to a whole lot of folks, and he certainly was a pioneer in many of the things that he did. And so it's very appropriate, particularly because of his interest in the Presidio as a recreation and park entity, that this visitors center be dedicated to him.
I think if you describe a leader to us that exemplifies those things that really transform what happens in this country in the Park Service, it's Bill Mott.
More recognition followed for Bill Mott. He was elected to the National Recreation and Park Association's Hall of Fame, the first time that this was done for anyone within 5 years of their death.
Bill Mott was recently elected into the Recreation and Park Hall of Fame, jointly sponsored by NRPA and the American Academy of Park and Recreation Administration. With that recognition, Bill has taken his place among a select few individuals who represent the most significant leaders in our field since its inception. This recognition was an honor to the man, but more importantly, it helps to define for all of us the qualities of true leadership.
Bill Mott was a practical visionary who consistently urged thoughtful planning for the 21st century in order to protect and save the environment.
He was concerned about the global environment and was convinced that world peace, economic goals, and nations prosper when they recognize the value of knowing the role the environment plays in our survival as people on this earth.
From his teachings, Bill Mott gave us 6 guiding leadership principles to follow.
Because it's important that we transfer these national parks and units of the national park system to future generations in better condition than we received them.
We knew in our experience with Bill that he had really 6 leadership principles that sort of guided his magnificent career at all levels and still guide the best leaders today.
Be visionary. Guide today's decisions by tomorrow's reality. Think creatively. Dare to try new and controversial ideas. Be aggressive. Market and sell a quality product. Share the credit. Assemble a team of good people and let them do their jobs. Educate your constituency and then trust them to make an informed choice. Never give up. Hold on to your dreams until they come true.
Bill Mott received many awards in his lifetime, and it's revealing to know that when he was asked which one meant the most to him, he said it was being elected honorary park ranger.
And I guess one of the great thrills was when I was given an award and made an honorary ranger of the California State Park System. I think probably that meant more to me than the other awards that I've been given.